Hi everyone, welcome to the Breakout session sponsored by Fortinet and Barrier Networks. I'm going to be your presenter for the next half an hour or so. My name is Jamie Graves. I work at Fortinet as VP of Security Analytics, which basically means I work with a fair few products that use artificial intelligence or machine learning and as features. I get asked a fair amount how AI can help an organization with its security goals. And this is quite a complex question to answer. And so the aim of today's presentation is really to try and help you understand what AI is good at, what it's less good at, in order to give you a better insight into how you can position it to help you achieve some of your security journey objectives. Before we do that, I think it'd be useful to just give a bit of an overview of the state of the market and a bit of a historical timeline. As we know, AI is everywhere right now. It is driving our cars, it's beating us at video games, it's beating us at chess and various other pretty ancient activities. It seems as if AI is getting really good to the point where it may replace human beings. And as such, there's been a lot of debate within the press about the future of AI and how it's going to affect humankind. So are we going to have a nice, friendly future with talking cars where we can go on adventures with them and save the day? Or are we basically going to be fighting robots for the rest of time? I'll chip in on this at the end of the presentation. But I think it's safe to say that some of the stories in the press are slightly overblown. We've been living with AI for quite some time now. Here's a history, a timeline of artificial intelligence. Some of the techniques that we use are a lot older than this timeline represents. For example, in FortiInsight, one of the products I'm going to talk about today, we use Bayesian statistics. So it comes from Thomas Bayes, so that's been around for a good couple hundred years. But in terms of our current modern understanding of AI, it really starts with Turing and a lot of the work that he did, which progressed, started, and really created the first boom in AI interest. All the way through to the mid-70s. And a lot of techniques that we have nowadays are fairly old, come from this period. And the reason why there was a pause in the mid-70s, what we know is the big first winter, is due to a number of factors. First of all, we didn't have powerful enough CPUs, computer processors, to allow us to train the models, the features that were being built from the research that had been ongoing. And we didn't have enough data either. Remember back, this was in a period where storage was incredibly expensive, so it was hard to get sufficient amounts of data. And really what we've seen in the past 10, 15 years or so has been due to the drop in processing power and the drop in the cost of storage capabilities, which has led us to really what I guess we could call a new renaissance in artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we have really cheap computing power, and we have lots and lots of data being churned out by our phones, by sensors that's all over the place. So the self-driving car that I showed you previously, that has hundreds of sensors generating billions of events in order to train the models that allow it to do its job. So we have this capability built on advances in technology. And Fortinet itself have a lot of innovation in this area as well, which we're going to talk about today. So we've had AI for a while now. It's being used very successfully in certain areas, but how does that relate to cybersecurity? Well, in order to understand how it relates to cybersecurity, let's have a think about AI as something that can help us achieve a particular task. And in order to do so, I'm going to illustrate this with a nice cup of tea. So this may bring back fond or horrific memories to some of you. Did any of you have one of these? Well, it was a great way of automating the process of making a cup of tea in the morning. You'd wake up and there would be a freshly made cup of tea. It wake you up, lovely cuppa, you could drink in bed. Unfortunately, not everyone has a butler that can pour it for them, so we have this machine. I remember this from my childhood. Unfortunately, as great an innovation as this is, it'll only make you one cup of tea. It'll only put one sort of milk in your tea. And it'll only make you one cup of tea once a day at a set time. Now, this is something that we could potentially improve upon. So let's think about this in terms of the analogy with AI. So imagine we're trying to create a better type of tea making, what is effectively a robot. So this is a very simple, basic robot. It can do a couple of things. It can do it pretty well, but it's not very flexible. So let's think about what we need to do in order to make things a lot better. So let's imagine this is our tea making robot. It's an actual tea making robot. It was invented in China. I recommend you go and check out videos of it on YouTube. It's incredibly impressive. So in order to make our tea making robot, we need to train it. And we want it to be as flexible as possible, but its main goal is to make us a cup of tea that we ask it to. So let's think about the sorts of things we need to train it to do. So first of all, what kind of tea would you like? Would you like breakfast, Darjeeling, green tea, Earl Grey tea? Okay. Would you like it loose leaf tea? So something a little special, maybe a little more expensive, or you're just after a classic cup of tea bag tea. So if so, what would you like? Would you like squares, triangles, well, pyramids, circles? We all each have our preference. What about tea temperature? So different types of tea require different temperatures. The whole world of tea making is something that has become really quite interesting to me since I researched this presentation. I didn't realize that. I thought you put just hot water in, but no, you need different types of hot water for different types of tea. The next thing we need to do is figure out whether we want milk, and if so, what kind of milk. There is a huge range of different types of milk. You go to your coffee shop, there's usually 4 or 5 different options there. Same with the tea world as well. Do you want sugar? If so, do you want a cube, granulated, or maybe even an artificial sweetener that we have there? And finally, depending on the type of tea, would you like a slice of lemon? So we have lots and lots of different variables, lots of different factors that, based on combinations, you could say requires a little more imagination than just a simple yes-no decision-making process. So we've got lots of factors here that we need to take into account. So we've got a nice cup of tea. Our AI robot has navigated all the different things that we want. And so what goes better with a cup of tea than a really nice biscuit? So you say, thank you, AI robot. Thank you for my cup of tea. Can I please have a biscuit? Unfortunately, no, you can't. And that's because we haven't taught our robot about biscuits. We've only taught it about tea. And this rather stretched metaphor kind of helps us understand a bit about where we can properly apply AI, which is when it comes to individual tasks itself, when it comes to learning about specific things that we can potentially replace humans, but it requires a little bit of creativity and flexibility, we're doing great. But if we think about the driving car, playing video games, beating us at chess, they're examples of AI doing one thing incredibly well. What we don't have is AI that can do a number of different things across a broad area very well. So the best application for AI is really where we have a single task that can be automated, can be relieved from a human, where there's lots and lots of data, lots of fast-paced critical decisions needs to be made, and as a result, we can get AI in to do the job. So how do we use it in security? Well, within the security domain, AI has 2 broad capabilities. One is classification. So in our now infamous example of ducks, does a duck walk? Does it quack? Does it swim like a duck? In that case, it's a duck. If not, it's one of those particular ducks shown on the right-hand side. So classification is good for figuring out good versus bad. Malware is a very good example of this. The other area in which we use AI in cybersecurity is anomaly detection. So is this normal? Is this behavior I'm seeing what I should be seeing? So anomaly detection, for example. And just like the slide I showed you at the start of the presentation, AI has had a fairly long history in security. We can say that one of the classics is spam, so classification of good versus bad emails, where we used to have this old technique which was known as patterns and rules. I remember configuring various patterns and rules in my email provider to try and block spam emails from certain advertisers or certain people. Then we evolved onto blacklists, and the usual kind of cat and mouse game of trying to outwit the attacker evolved from there. However, about 20 years ago, thereabouts, we started looking at different machine learning capabilities, different statistical techniques, such as Bayesian techniques, in order to give us a better chance at defeating the spammers. And you may now notice that if you use services like Gmail, Google has a very, very high hit rate for detecting spam. So I think it's over 99%. And that's because they have lots and lots of different users, us, basically classifying the email for them. And then they take that learning and then they put it into their machine learning algorithms, and they can get incredibly good results from it. And that's why we're living in an increasingly spam-free world. The next area that we can use AI in cybersecurity is anomaly detection. So I remember back in the days where we would have to write rules in order to analyze network traffic, and some of these rules were pretty tricky to write because they were signatures effectively, and when you see changes in network behavior over time, it's hard to capture that. A lot of the time we were creating rules based on heuristics. Where heuristics were basically where we didn't code expertise. So for example, as a network administrator, I'd know that my sysadmins would log in between these certain time periods. And if they logged in out with that time period, then I know that there was something potentially wrong. However, there's always edge cases, there's always corner cases, meaning that this sort of approach was high in false positives. Now we have the ability to detect anomalies machine learning. So we can understand the standard behavior, patterns of behavior on a network by training our models. And we're able to create a baseline, understand differences, and alert once we see the deviation within that behavior. So classification and anomaly detection are two areas in which machine learning really helps us. And at Fortinet, we have a number of different products that can help us with that. So let's think about how we'd classify these particular technologies and capabilities by thinking about apples and how you'd detect a bad apple. So FortiSandbox. FortiSandbox is a way of understanding whether code is good or bad or not, and effectively it takes a bite out of the apple. It takes the piece of malware or piece of code that's suspicious, and it effectively starts it up, tries to understand exactly how it operates. FortiInsight is about users and devices within your network, so trusted. So how do you find that bad apple? Well, we can understand the behavior of it, we can understand where the bad apple in the barrel is. FortiAI itself is an iteration on Sandbox. It's a fast way of understanding where malware comes from. So it can do static analysis of the code and understand very, very quickly where the bit of software coming into your network is good or bad. And then finally, we've got a piece of technology called FortiDeceptor, where we can use various tricks and capabilities to help trap and frustrate the attackers who may have gained access to a network. Try and get them to waste their time and resources on these fake resources, so basically honeypot technology. So I'm going to spend the next part of the presentation talking about some of these technologies and how they can help you within your organization. So first up, let's talk about FortiSandbox. So zero-day malware protection. And malware is still a huge issue for the industry. And looking at the attack surfaces we have here, we've still got the same old, suspects. Still got email attachments, web page issues, email links. So looking at particularly phishing and spear phishing. So we're looking at malicious software that gets onto our machines and causes huge problems, specifically relating to things like ransomware or stealing of companies' secrets. So looking at this, sandboxing is a very, very useful technology. And it fits into our model pretty well. So zero-day threats are a huge issue based on the fact that they're unknown. We don't know about them before we need to know about them. So we can't apply whitelists. We can't apply blacklist signatures. And we can't apply slightly fuzzier technologies, so reputation or heuristics or various other signatures like that. So by its very nature, zero day, we need to understand the behavior of the application itself in order to understand whether it's going to do something good or bad to our organization. And that's where sandboxing comes in, where we have a file, an application that we're a bit suspicious about. We don't quite know what it's going to do to our organization. And so as such, we want some way of understanding the effect it's going to have on our organization before we let it in. And that's basically what we have with our sandboxing technology, where if there's a suspicious file, we can place it into a sandbox. We can spin it up in a virtual machine or environment that's suitable for it. We can get it to run and understand its behavior. And all of this is powered by machine learning. So all of this could be done by humans, but it's a lot faster to have it performed by machine learning, because we're at a point now where we can automate out the human because we understand this domain well enough. FortiAI is the next product I'd like to talk about. And FortiAI is really a really nice iteration from FortiSandbox. It allows us to understand, once again, zero-day attacks. It allows us to understand the intention of the software or programs coming into our organization. So the product vision or goal of FortiAI is to once again mimic human functions and capabilities, which is try and understand where malware came from within the organization. So we do this by performing an analysis of the code itself. So taking the bit of malware, unwrapping it, and checking out the individual lines of code. And we've got billions of samples of malware code. So we've become really good at training our machine learning features and capabilities on what good versus bad programs look like. And we can also pick up various interesting snippets as well. So for example, we can give the company some intel on who may be targeting them. So maybe it's a specially crafted piece of malware. If it's been specially crafted, there are certain signatures or features within the code that may be indicative of a particular group of threat actors, or it may be a piece of generic code. So these are the sorts of pieces of intel that make it a lot more interesting to help protect your organization based on some of the features we can pull out. And a human analyst can do this, so they can look through the source code. They can say, yes, I'm going to attribute it to this group, or no, it's a fairly generic piece of code. But they take a while to do it. As it says here, it takes weeks to do it. Whereas with FortiAI, we've got to a point where using machine learning, we are able to do it far, far faster. So here's a really interesting graph here where we're showing you the humans versus computers. So basically, we have humans doing far better than computers for the first 32 to 36 weeks. And once we feed enough data into the machine learning algorithm, so remember at the start of the presentation, I was talking about how we need lots of data and lots of processing power in order to make these things work properly. Well, we have lots of data, we have lots of processing power, and we start to see from week 30, 34, 35 onwards, the computers starting to regularly beat human analysts in terms of providing that level of insight. As I mentioned previously, there are lots of different scenarios that we can gather intel about. So these are some of them here. So answering the questions about what kind of attack am I under? What's the intent? Why is it malicious? So all these things are really important to understand whether this is part of a wider campaign against your organization. And here's an example of the virtual analyst in action. So we've got something that's been downloaded. We've got detection, and we've got it spreading. And this is the attack timeline that FortiAI comes up with. So this is all automated. So this is something that if it was a human analyst would have taken a long time to do, but this was done within seconds, if not minutes. The other important area where FortiAI can add value as well is around fileless malware, which we've seen a big increase in as well, which is where you don't necessarily have to download a file or application, an application where it could be in a file. So for example, in this particular scenario, we've got a phishing link. We've got a file which looks pretty innocuous. It could be your bonus info.docx, something like that. But within it, it has code that effectively acts like malware, but it bypasses some of the traditional malware infiltration routes and goes out, establishes itself, lives off the land, launches PowerShell, downloads, and pulls down some more nasty files in order to go out and do its master's bidding. With FortiAI, because it analyzes the code, at the end of the day, we're able to pick up on and understand this in the same way that we would with classic file-based malware as well. So it's a very, very powerful approach. The final product I'd like to talk about is FortiInsight, which uses machine learning to help you understand what users and devices are doing within your organization. So normally a trusted domain. And the reason why this is important is because there is a blind spot in security analytics. So we've spoken an awful lot about malware in this particular presentation. As an industry, we've focused a great deal, quite rightly, on firewalls and malware and classic lines of detection and control in order to keep people out. However, we've been fairly poor at understanding what's going on within our organization. So this hard shell perimeter. And it's led to a blind spot, so much so that some studies and reports show that 30% of breaches are due to actors within the organization acting negligently or maliciously. So this is commonly known as the insider threat. It can be attributed to users or machines that have been compromised. There are lots of different types of classification. When it comes to humans, we can say that there are a broad range of different types of insider. There's the accidental insider, which by far make up the majority of issues. So they've not been trained properly, or they're just trying to get their job done. So maybe there aren't the secure processes within the organization to allow them to do this. There's the malicious insider, so maybe they're about to leave the organization or they've been bribed in order to steal data from the organization. And then finally, there's the advanced insider. So this is the state actor or gang member who has maybe infiltrated your organization, is maybe pretending to be someone, and is doing some form of data exfiltration. This type of technology is typically used within the market in order to either protect IP or remain compliant. So for example, one of our customers, a government customer here, uses FortiInsight in order to remain compliant to GDPR. So they have a lot of PII on their networks, and they need to know really, really quickly whether they've suffered a data breach or not. And using some of the behavioral machine learning capabilities that FortiInsight have, they're able to do that really quickly. The other use case is protecting IP. So in engineering, we have case studies around Formula One racing teams that potentially could have lost their IP when an engineer left them, taking various files with them, but using our approach, they were able to detect this and stop that from happening. And then, of course, games manufacturers. So trying to understand what properties within their network are potentially being exposed to things like shadow IT, which is obviously of huge concern, and especially in this environment as well, with COVID, and trying to understand what users are doing on their home machines while they're working from remote locations. As I said at the start of the presentation, I've got some final thoughts on where we're going with machine learning and AI. And I think that we do really well, as I said, with relation to point solutions, so solving specific challenges within the domain. So we end up in a world where we've got lots of different sensor inputs going into our SOC or our SIM, and generally it's up to humans to then triage this and try and understand what's going on, which can be really quite problematic based on some of the challenges we see in the industry, especially around lack of personnel, lack of availability within the market, and also sometimes having alert fatigue or burnout with relation to a lot of activity coming in. And this is where I see, once again, machine learning being able to help us. So putting that in as a layer between the human and all of the sensors, and really kind of augmenting the human to allow them to do their job more effectively by offloading a lot of the automated tasks or automated triage or analysis that can be done far more effectively and just as well by machines. Which kind of leads me to reflect upon the first slide that I put up about whether we're going to be fighting robots or having fun adventures with cars, and really I think this is where we're going to end up, where we're not going to have robots taking over the world, but we're going to have them helping us in our day-to-day activities in order to speed things up and improve the lives of various workers. So thank you very much for your time. It's been great doing this presentation. Please do visit the Fortinet and Barra Networks booth. I've been Jamie Graves. Thank you very much.